That morning began like any other. The sun had just started spilling soft light through the curtains, casting a gentle glow across the kitchen table where I sat with my first cup of coffee. My son Armin was already up, moving quietly in the living room. He was 17 now, tall for his age, with the same dark eyes that always seemed to be searching for something. Maybe answers, maybe his place in this world. We had always had a complicated relationship, more like friends than parent and child, but there was an unspoken distance between us that neither of us seemed to know how to close. Maybe it was the years of tension that came after my husband left, or maybe it was just the way life worked sometimes. I watched Armin from the kitchen, noticing how he kept glancing at his phone but never really scrolling. Something was off. The silence between us felt heavier than usual. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "Mom, can we talk?" I put down my mug and nodded, trying to steady my nerves. I'd been waiting for this moment but not quite sure what to expect. We sat down at the kitchen table together, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like he was truly present. Not just physically but emotionally too. "I've been thinking," he began, "about everything that's happened. About us, about this house, about Dad." I swallowed hard, bracing myself. This was the conversation I had tried to avoid for months. Armin looked me straight in the eye and said, "I feel like I don't know where I belong anymore. Like I'm stuck between being your son and something else." I wanted to ask him to explain, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I listened as he continued. "Sometimes I act out because it feels like the only way to get noticed. Like maybe if I cross a line just once you'll see me." His honesty hit me like a wave. I realized then that this boundary he was talking about, the one he might cross, was more than just a rule or a limit. It was a desperate attempt to connect. "I don't want to lose you," I whispered. "But you have to understand, some lines are there to protect us, not to keep us apart." He nodded, but I saw the tension still there, like a storm waiting to break. That afternoon things began to shift. Armin seemed restless, pacing back and forth, the energy in the house charged with unspoken words. Later he came into the kitchen and asked if I could help him with something in his room. I followed him upstairs, curious. He closed the door behind us and pulled out a small box from under his bed. Inside were letters, some old, some recent, written to people he never sent them to. Words filled with pain, regret, hope. I sat beside him, reading the raw emotions he had bottled up for so long. It was then I realized how much he had been carrying alone. How every boundary he crossed was a silent cry for help. We spent hours talking that night, breaking down walls we didn't even know existed. And though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. The day my son crossed that boundary was the day everything began to change. The morning after our long conversation, the air in the house felt different. Lighter but still filled with tension. I could tell Armin was thinking about everything we had said, but also wrestling with what it all meant. The silence between us wasn't as heavy anymore, but it was still there, like a fragile thread waiting to be pulled. I tried to go about my day, but my mind kept drifting back to him, to the boy who was trying so hard to find his way, to be seen and understood. The feeling was strange, part worry, part hope. That afternoon, Armin came to me again, but this time with a small request. "Mom, can you help me with something?" His voice was softer, almost hesitant. "I need a massage. My back's been killing me from all the stress." I hesitated for a moment. It was an unusual request. He was always independent, rarely asking for help with anything. But I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the tightness in his shoulders when he turned. How could I say no? "Okay," I said, "come sit down." He lowered himself onto the couch and I knelt behind him, placing my hands gently on his back. His muscles were tense and stiff, and I could feel the stress that had been building up, not just physically but emotionally too. I started to rub his shoulders carefully, trying to ease the tightness. His breathing slowed, and for a moment there was silence between us. Comfortable, not strained. His body relaxed under my touch, but I noticed his hands trembling slightly. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. He shrugged but didn't pull away. "Just a lot on my mind," he said. We stayed like that for a while, me rubbing his back, him sinking deeper into the moment. It was a quiet kind of connection, the kind that words sometimes can't reach. But then something shifted. His hands stopped trembling and instead they moved, tentatively, awkwardly, toward mine. I felt a sudden jolt of surprise but didn't pull away. His hands were shaking, uncertain, like he was reaching for something he wasn't sure he deserved. Take it easy, son, I whispered, more to myself than to him. I wasn't sure why the words came out, but they felt necessary, as if I was reminding both of us that this moment was fragile and we needed to be careful. He didn't respond, but I felt his breath catch. The silence stretched between us again, but this time it was different, charged with a kind of energy I hadn't expected. I knew then that things were changing in ways I hadn't anticipated. That boundary we'd talked about, the one between us, was being tested. For the rest of the day we kept a cautious distance. Neither of us spoke much, but I could feel his presence everywhere. In the way he moved through the house, in the quiet moments when our eyes met and quickly looked away. That evening as I prepared dinner, I caught him watching me from the doorway. There was something in his gaze, a mix of longing and confusion, vulnerability and hesitation. I wanted to say something, to reach out and tell him it was going to be okay. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I offered a small smile, hoping it would be enough. After dinner we sat together on the couch, closer than usual but not touching. The TV was on, but neither of us was really watching. The silence was different now. Less heavy, more like an unspoken promise that we were both trying. Later, as I got ready for bed, I thought about how much had shifted in just one day. How a simple request for a massage had opened a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through, but now couldn't ignore. I lay awake for hours, wondering where this new path would lead us, and if we would find a way back to the relationship we both wanted. One built on trust, understanding, and respect. The next morning dawned quiet, with soft light filtering through the curtains. The house felt strangely calm, but beneath the surface, an undercurrent of tension hummed softly, like something unsaid waiting to be spoken aloud. Armin was already up when I went downstairs. He was sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window with a faraway look in his eyes. His shoulders were still tense, but there was a quiet resolve in his posture I hadn't seen before. "Morning," I said, trying to keep my voice light. He looked up and managed a small smile. "Morning, Mom." I poured us both a cup of coffee and sat across from him. We didn't say much at first, just the usual morning routine noises filling the space. But I could tell he wanted to say something. Finally, after a long pause, he spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about boundaries." I nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I don't want to mess things up," he said quietly. "Between us, I mean. I'm scared." His words struck a chord deep inside me. I reached across the table, brushing my hand lightly over his. "Me too," I admitted. "But talking about it like this, it's a start." He looked at me, then really looked. There was a vulnerability there that made my heart ache. "I don't know what I want," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I know I don't want to lose you." That confession felt like a lifeline thrown across the chasm growing between us. I squeezed his hand gently. "You won't lose me. We'll figure this out together." For the first time in days, the weight between us seemed to ease a little. The day moved forward slowly. We did small things around the house. He helped me organize the bookshelves. I cooked lunch while he fixed the leaking faucet in the kitchen sink. Our actions spoke more than words, an unspoken truce forming between us. But beneath the surface, I sensed Armin wrestling with feelings he wasn't ready to voice. The way he glanced at me when he thought I wasn't looking, the quick tightening of his jaw when a certain topic came up. Later, while folding laundry, I caught him standing by the hallway mirror, running his hands through his hair with a look of frustration. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but I held back, knowing he needed space. As evening approached, the tension returned in full force. We sat in the living room, the silence stretched tight between us again. I picked up a photo album from the coffee table, flipping through old pictures. Images of happier times, birthdays, vacations. He came over and sat beside me, eyes scanning the pages. There was a photo of us at a family picnic, laughing under the sun. I pointed to it and smiled. "We looked so happy that day." He nodded, but his eyes were distant. "We did." The air thickened, charged with unspoken words and memories too painful to revisit. Suddenly, Armin shifted closer, his hand resting near mine on the couch. I felt my heart race, not from excitement but from the intensity of the moment. He looked at me, eyes searching as if trying to find the right words. "I don't want to cross a line," he said finally. "But sometimes I don't know where that line is." I swallowed hard, realizing this was the heart of our struggle. "We'll find that line together," I said softly. "And if we ever feel like we're stepping over it, we'll stop. Promise." He nodded again, relief washing over his face. That night, I lay awake thinking about how fragile our connection was, how easy it could be to break everything, but also how much we both wanted to hold on. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I was determined to face it with honesty, patience, and care. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones fought in silence, and the strongest bonds are the ones rebuilt piece by piece. The following days unfolded slowly, like a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. The house, once filled with easy laughter and warm routine, now carried an unspoken tension that neither of us could ignore. Armin seemed more withdrawn, his usual spark dimmed. I noticed how he lingered in doorways, pausing when I entered a room as if unsure of how to be around me now. It hurt to see him like that, so close yet so distant. One afternoon I found him sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the garden with a faraway look. The summer sun cast long shadows across his face, highlighting the weariness in his eyes. I sat beside him quietly, not rushing to fill the silence. After a moment he spoke. "Mom, do you ever feel like you're trapped? Like no matter what you do, you can't get out of where you are?" I looked at him, surprised by the raw honesty in his voice. It was a question I'd asked myself many times but had never voiced. "I do," I admitted softly. "Sometimes life puts us in places we don't expect or don't want to be. But we find ways to keep going. We find little pieces of light to hold on to." He nodded, but his shoulders stayed heavy. "I just don't want to hurt anyone." His words made my heart ache. Hurt wasn't what I wanted for us, any of us. But I knew that sometimes pain was part of the path to understanding. That evening after dinner we sat in the living room, the air still thick but somehow less sharp. We talked about everything and nothing: music, school, memories from years ago. For a brief moment, it felt like we were just mother and son again, not tangled in complicated feelings. But the calm didn't last. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I heard the faint sound of footsteps in the hallway. I opened my door to see Armin standing there, hesitation written all over his face. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I nodded, stepping aside. He sat on the edge of my bed, hands clenched in his lap. "I don't know how to say this," he began, voice shaking, "but I think I'm scared of what I'm feeling." I took a deep breath, reaching out to place a comforting hand on his arm. "Tell me," I urged gently. "You can say anything." He swallowed hard, eyes meeting mine. "I care about you. More than just a mom should, I think." The words hung between us like a fragile thread. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "Thank you for being honest with me, Armin. It's okay to feel confused. What matters is how we handle those feelings." He looked down, biting his lip. "I don't want this to ruin everything. I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I promised. "We'll find a way to get through this, together." He nodded, relief softening his features. We sat there for a long time, the silence this time filled with understanding, not distance. The next morning brought new challenges. Armin seemed restless, pacing the house, avoiding eye contact. I decided to give him space but made sure to let him know I was there whenever he was ready. Later, while I was folding clothes, he came into the room quietly. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Whenever you want," I replied. He took a deep breath. "I'm sorry if I've made things uncomfortable." "You haven't," I reassured him. "It's brave to be honest about feelings even when they're complicated." He smiled faintly. "I'm trying to figure out who I am." "Me too," I said softly. That afternoon we took a walk in the park. The fresh air and open space seemed to ease some of the heaviness between us. We talked about hopes, fears, and the future. I saw glimpses of the boy I loved, struggling to grow up amid confusing emotions. As the sun set, casting golden light over the trees, I knew the road ahead would be difficult. But I also knew we weren't alone. We had each other, and sometimes that was enough to start healing. The days that followed were a delicate balance of pretending everything was normal while holding a secret tension between us. It was like walking on a fragile glass floor, every step careful, every word measured. I wanted to support Armin, to help him navigate whatever storm was raging inside, but I also feared pushing too hard, scaring him away. One morning I found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at his breakfast. The sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating the small specks of dust floating in the air. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down opposite him. "Hey," I said softly. He looked up, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Hey." How are you feeling today? He shrugged, the motion small but weighted. Same as yesterday, I guess. I reached across the table, brushing my hand over his knuckles. You don't have to do this alone. His gaze flickered, searching mine for some kind of answer. I don't know what to do. I'm here, I said. Whatever you need, whenever you're ready. There was a pause before he spoke again. Sometimes I think about running away, just disappearing. My heart tightened. Where would you go? Anywhere but here. I wanted to tell him that home was where people cared about him, that he wasn't alone, but the words caught in my throat. How could I convince him when the air between us was thick with unspoken things? Instead, I squeezed his hand gently. You're stronger than you think. He gave a weak smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. That afternoon, I noticed Armin retreating more into himself. He stopped joining family dinners, preferring to stay in his room with the door closed. I respected his need for space but worried about the silence growing between us. One evening, as I was tidying up the living room, I heard soft music playing from his room. Curious, I knocked lightly. Can I come in? Sure, he replied. I stepped inside to see him sitting on the floor, surrounded by scattered notebooks and pens. The music was low, soothing. What are you working on? I asked, sitting beside him. He hesitated, then handed me a notebook. Pages filled with poems and sketches stared back at me, raw, honest, full of pain and hope. These are beautiful, I told him. You have a gift. He shrugged. It helps me make sense of things. I nodded, understanding more than he realized. Art, writing, music, they were lifelines in times of confusion. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of connection, a bridge forming over the distance. The next day, I decided to take him out for a change of scenery. We drove to a quiet lake on the outskirts of town, where the water shimmered under a soft breeze. We walked along the shore, the sound of waves gently crashing against the rocks. Do you remember when you were little? I asked. He looked at me, surprised. You used to love coming here. You'd skip stones and chase the ducks. He smiled, a real one this time. I do remember. We found a fallen log to sit on, watching the sun dip below the horizon. I don't want to lose who I am, he said suddenly. You won't, I promised. You're growing, learning. It's okay to be unsure. He leaned his head on my shoulder and I held him close. That night, as we sat quietly in the living room, I realized how much we both needed to heal. Our bond had been tested, stretched thin by the weight of feelings we didn't fully understand. But there was still hope. Hope that with patience, love, and honesty we could find a way back to each other. The journey wasn't over yet. The days after our visit to the lake felt different. There was a subtle shift in Armin, less guarded, a little more present. It wasn't a sudden change, but a quiet unfolding, like the first rays of dawn pushing back the night. I knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain. Healing rarely came in neat packages or tidy moments. But the space between us was no longer filled with silence alone. It held possibility. One afternoon I found Armin sitting on the porch steps, sketchbook in hand. The late spring air was warm, carrying the scent of blooming flowers. Mind if I join you? I asked. He nodded, offering a small smile. We sat side by side, watching the world wake around us. A few birds chirped nearby and the neighborhood buzzed softly with life. After a while he spoke. I'm scared. I turned to face him, meeting his gaze. Scared of what? Of not being enough. Of losing myself. His words were raw, fragile. I reached out, placing my hand gently on his. You are enough, I said firmly. You don't have to carry it all alone. We sat like that for a long time, sharing a quiet understanding. That evening, Armin opened up more than he had before. About his struggles at school, the pressure he felt, the loneliness behind his smile. I listened, offering what comfort I could. It wasn't about fixing things immediately, but being there, steady and patient. In the days that followed, small moments stitched us closer. Cooking dinner together, watching old movies, sharing stories from our childhoods. One night, as I was tucking him in, he paused and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." His words warmed me in a way nothing else could. Because sometimes, the most profound acts of love are the ones that ask us simply to stay. To hold space. To believe in someone even when they don't believe in themselves. And that night, as he finally drifted to sleep, I knew that while the path ahead was still uncertain, we had taken a step, a meaningful one, towards healing. For both of us.